Hello, Matt here at U.S. Frontier Miniatures. Welcome to part two of our three-part series constructing this quarter-scale English settler's cottage circa 1620. In this part, among other things, we'll be covering preparing our straw roof bundles, assembling our basic cottage itself, priming and painting the various cottage parts, and also installing our windows and door. Before we go any further into this project, we need to start preparing our straw bundles for our thatch. As you can see here, we'll need 62-inch bundles for the front roof and 60 for the back. All told, we'll need a total of 120 2-inch bundles plus 20 peak bundles measuring 3.5 inches in length. Here's what our bundles will look like, the 2-inch ones, about 25 straws thick. And here's what the 3.5-inch roof peak bundles will look like. We tie our hemp cord about 1/4 inch from the end of the bundles or from the end of the peaks. We'll start by separating our little straw brooms, separating the lower plastic bindings around them, and that'll make it a lot easier for us to separate the straw into about 25 thickness bundles. For that, I use a pair of clippers, as well as I also use, after I cut the bindings, I'll use a pair of tweezers to go ahead and pull them out. Here's a broom that I've finished taking the bindings out. As you can see, it becomes fairly easy to work with these straw batches. What I do is kind of eye the number that's approximately 25 straws. I think you'll get a feel for this once you do a few as to what looks like a comfortable bundle or not. And then with each batch there can make two 2-inch bundles or one 3.5-inch bundle. And I use this cotton hemp cord to go ahead and tie the bundles. And I do this while it's still attached to the broom, which makes it easier. I'll use my surface mat there as a guide, since it's marked off in inches, and I'll, as I mentioned, place my hemp cord about 1/4 inch down, and then I'll go ahead and determine the 2.5 inches using that mat, as I mentioned, and I'll go ahead and cut the bundle. So it's tedious work, but it's something that's very doable. If you take your time, you'll come up with some good straw bundles. For the peaks, I also tie the knots first, at each end of the 3.5-inch piece, approximately 3/4 to 1 inch from each end. I use square knots, incidentally, which makes it easier to adjust the knots later on if you find that they've slipped or something. You can move them up or down the batch of straw. Now, after we get our 20 bundles cut and tied, we have to soak them in water for about 3 days. Otherwise, the peak bundles would break when we attempt to bend them over the peak. So we're going to soak them first. And I'm just using a paint tray here and pouring the water in, and then we'll put rubber bands around them after we fold them in the middle. After 3 days, remove them from the water, bend them in half, and put rubber bands around them until you are ready to use them. Okay, now it's time to assemble our basic house structure. We've got all our main parts here, plus our gator board and this chimney piece. We'll use Elmer's Pro Bond wood glue to hold all the parts together. First, I'll drill a hole in the center of the top of the chimney piece to hold our center flue. I've used this portable vise, and I've used it in the past because it's very flexible and it's easy to move all around my work table. I'll center the hole and get it started with this screw starter tool. I'll then use a battery-powered drill, 1/4-inch bit, and I'll go down about 1/2 inch. Okay, there's the hole for the flue. We'll start assembling the house structure by gluing our corner braces to the front and back pieces. Find something nice and square that you can line up the end of the gator board with the end of the brace. I'd like to use this old bookend that I found in a thrift store. The base also has to be aligned on the bottom of the house piece. Next, we'll find the center of the right side piece so we can glue on the chimney piece to it. At the same time, we will glue on the roof braces on each side. For the chimney side, use the 2 shorter roof braces. Next, we want to glue on the front and back pieces used for gluing our house to our stand. We'll finish by gluing on the chimney piece. So our braces are all dry now. We'll start by putting glue on both the front and back end braces and then gluing the sides on. Using a mat like I have here certainly comes in handy, as you can make sure that all 4 corners of the house, and in fact the house itself, are perfectly square. The last step, we will use our bookends to lock the parts in place in order to let them dry. Okay, with our basic structure glued together, we now want to put a prime coat of white paint on the outside of the whole house. But first, we need to cover our window areas with painter's tape. This is because the black finish of our gator board is important to later create that daytime appearance of looking at the windows of a house from a reasonable distance. So we'll use this Crayon white primer on the house itself, and at the same time we'll also apply this Rust-Oleum flat gray primer to the 2 roof pieces. I'll step outside and do this off camera. As long as we are spray painting, we might as well do our windows and doors at the same time. For the door and window parts, we'll use this Rust-Oleum satin finish dark brown paint. For painting small parts, I mount them first on cardboard using a double-sided transparency tape made by Scotch. It's easy to use, and after the paint dries, it's also easy to separate the parts from the mounting tape. The roof parts that we have primed with a flat gray, we will spray on a coat of this Krylon matte summer wheat to the top sides only. This will give us a good background for our straw bundles. Well, all systems are go here. The project is certainly starting to take shape. Our house is primed white, our windows are painted their final dark brown color, and the top side of the two roof parts are painted the summer wheat color. You can see here how they blend in with the straw bundles. We'll go ahead and remove our painter's tape now over the windows and door. And it's time to both put those windows and doors on and also cut to size our half timber beams that we had previously distressed and aged. You can cut these half timber pieces from the plans, of course, but I have found that you get a much better fit by measuring each piece individually as you go along. I use my miniature miter box for this. After cutting, I reopen my alcohol and India ink solution that we originally stained the wood with, so we can stain the ends that we have just cut. Next, I use a combination of Elmer's glue all and the Gorilla brand super glue to glue the timbers with a half timber pieces of miniature wood onto the house frame. Okay, here's the house with most of the half timber miniature lumber glued on. Plus, we've also glued on the painted door. Now for the windows, I use a product from Woodland Scenics called Light Diffusing Window Film. It's a two-part product that consists of a dark tinted plastic, kind of a dark tinted clear plastic though, and a white material that's a kind of translucent, and it's called the diffusing film. It's the dark tinted material that I'm interested in and I use on most of my houses except when I light them. Here's an example of a stone house that I recently finished, where I've used this dark tinting material against the backdrop of my black gator board, and you can see the effect it gives to your house. Just for your information, here's an example where I use both the diffusing film, the white film, and the dark tinted film on a house that I had installed lighting in. As you can see, this Woodland Scenics light diffusing window film gives you a very realistic effect as to whether you want to have a nighttime view of a lit house or a daytime view. Another point here is that if you're interested in historically accurate miniatures, as I am, keep in mind that houses really didn't have electricity until around the early 1900s. I mean, it was only in 1882 that Thomas Edison came up with the first power plant in New York City where he could power up about 5,000 lights. Well, I have some smaller cut pieces of this dark tinted film. I'm going to cut them a little larger in my window openings and use what's called glue dots to affix the film to my house. I don't know if you can see them or not clearly, but they are small 3/18 inch diameter glue surfaces that you remove from the paper backing. You remove them by pressing the paper with the glue dot on it firmly against your gator board surface and then peeling the paper away. You place one dot in each corner of the window. You really want it outside of where the window will be viewed, where the window opening is. Then you just take your dark tinted film and press it right on. Well, here's our finished house now with the tinted film glued onto the cottage itself. And next we'll go ahead and glue our windows onto the tinted film. For that, I use super glue. In fact, Gorilla brand super glue, which has about a 10-second setup time. I use a pair of tweezers and use the end of a paper clip to take the super glue that I previously had put on the center of the aluminum foil to just put a small amount on each corner of the windows. And then what you want to do is to place it in one motion so you don't smear it on the rest of the tinted film. Yeah, that's got it. Now this technique takes a little practice, and it doesn't always go smoothly. So if you do happen to make a mistake and smear glue all over the tinted film, just lift it up off of the glue dots and replace it with another new strip. Well, this will certainly pass muster. All the windows are glued on and we're ready to go to the next step of completing the half timber boards. So at this point, we're ready to finish the placement of our half timber boards. Despite the best of planning, I always prefer to have our windows and doors in place so that you can measure the actual distances and ensure a more accurate fit. So one board at a time, I recommend that you carefully measure, cut, and place each half timber board in its correct position on the. Okay, so at this point I have finished cutting each of the individual remaining half timber boards and glued them on. Okay, as we added these half boards, we added 2 to each side of the cottage doors. Just because I think it looks better. It wasn't on the plans, but I just want to let you know that we added it. So now it's time to seal our doors. We actually have 2 choices, not to seal the doors, but to seal the half beams. We either have a matte finish of Mod Podge or a satin finish. And we want to do this so they're easy to clean as we apply the stucco to make sure we eliminate as much residue as possible from the beams themselves. So what we're going to do is use the matte finish here and go ahead and apply it to the half beams. We finished sealing the beams, and look at the weathering on them, especially our axe marks. This hodgepodge sealer really brings out the fine details. So it is now time to apply our simulated stucco finish. Stucco, incidentally, does go back to early colonial times in America. It is a mixture of cement, sand, lime, and water. Normally it's a 2-coat process where the first coat is to apply the cement mixture with a steel trowel. After that dries, next you apply a second coat with a hard rubber trowel. This process with the second coat across the finish raises the sand in the stucco mixture to give you that stucco look. There are a number of ways to simulate the stucco finish, and sponge is one of them. And another method is to use a brush and then also this miniature trowel that you see here. One of the things, I always say scale is king, and I've acquired these miniature sponges, which I think gives me what I'm looking for, which is something similar to what's called a medium float finish. But first, we have to cover our windows and doors as a precaution before we apply our stucco. And we're using painter's masking tape for this. And as well as, I'm using my mat to measure the tape and to make sure I can get the exact cut of pieces to fill in on the windows. It also makes for a neater job if you cover our half timber beams. So I've gone ahead and cut a strip off here, show you how I do that, and we can then proceed to cover one side of the house and apply our stucco. Well, that's the end of part 2. Coming up in part 3, we of course will be completing our project. Well, if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up below and also subscribe. That way you'll be informed of my future projects. Below I have added time codes and major section headings so that you can access specific parts of the video more easily. This is a complete craft project from the chimney top right down to the display stand that it sits on. And by necessity, I've divided it into 3 video parts according to the sequence that I actually built it in. So if you're going to build an English settler's a cottage for yourself, I certainly recommend that you view the other two videos. Don't forget to get a free copy of the house plan drawings below, plus the list of supplies and materials that are used in this project. In case you can't get some of these items locally, I've furnished links for you to obtain them. Lastly, I invite you to visit my Etsy shop where you can see examples of my other models. See the link below. I look forward to seeing you in part three. And in the meantime, if you have any questions that I can help you with, please ask them in the comments section below.